It was supposed to be a fresh start, an exciting Christmas blind date. But for Jamal, a single black dad just looking for a little holiday joy, it turned into a nightmare. Rejected before the date even began, he was left standing alone in the cold, humiliated and crushed by the look of disbelief in her eyes. Why was he treated like this? Was it just another night of disappointment, or something much deeper? What if one woman's question would change everything, and make him question the world he thought he knew? Stay tuned to find out. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you are listening. Your support means everything. Jamal had never planned to be a single dad. But life had a way of throwing curveballs, and at 25, he'd found himself raising his 7-year-old daughter, Maya, on his own. The two of them had settled into a routine that worked: dinner at the small table in their modest apartment, Maya's laughter filling the space as she talked about school, and Jamal silently hoping for a better future. He'd put his dreams on hold to make sure Maya had what she needed. It wasn't easy. As a black man, he'd often felt invisible, like the world had already decided who he was before he had a chance to show them otherwise. In his neighborhood, the challenges were relentless. He worked long hours at a local warehouse, barely making enough to cover bills, but he made sure his daughter never saw him struggle. She deserved a childhood free from the weight of his burdens. When Christmas rolled around, Jamal decided he could use a little joy. He'd seen the advertisement for a blind date at a local cafe, a holiday matchmaking event for singles who might just need a little nudge to find love. At first, he hesitated. Was it worth it? But Maya, with her big eyes and unrelenting optimism, pushed him to give it a shot. "Maybe you'll find someone nice, Dad," she said, handing him the phone with a hopeful smile. So, with Maya's encouragement, Jamal signed up. It wasn't much, but maybe, just maybe, this would be his chance at a fresh start. He didn't expect fireworks, just a simple evening with someone who might understand the struggles of single parenthood. He picked out his best shirt, a crisp, light blue button-up he saved for special occasions. It wasn't fancy, but it made him feel good. He wanted to be seen, just for a night, as more than the man the world often ignored. As he straightened his collar in the bathroom mirror, he felt a fleeting sense of hope, a rare moment of excitement in his otherwise routine life. Maya had helped him choose the date. "Make sure you smile, Dad. Don't look so serious," she had teased. It was a light moment, a good moment. But deep down, Jamal knew this night was important. It wasn't just about finding someone to share the holidays with. It was about proving that he was worthy of love, of a chance, of more than just the life he'd been handed. When the time came, Jamal left his apartment with a nervous excitement in his chest. It felt like a small victory, a break from the heaviness of daily life. He made his way to the cafe, where the event was being held, thinking that, for once, he could simply enjoy a night of conversation and connection. But when he arrived, something felt off. He couldn't put his finger on it at first. Maybe it was the stares, the whispers, or the way some of the other attendees avoided making eye contact. He tried to brush it off. It was supposed to be just a casual meet and greet, after all. And then, the woman who was supposed to be his date arrived. Her name was Kelly. She was beautiful, with bright eyes and a soft smile. For a moment, Jamal thought maybe, just maybe, things would be different. But when Kelly saw him, the warmth in her smile vanished. It was brief, too quick to be certain, but Jamal saw it. The hesitation. The unease. She looked at him, looked at his skin, and in that moment, it felt like everything shifted. He could feel the tension building, thick and suffocating. Kelly's polite smile returned, but it was forced, unnatural. Jamal, for a second, wanted to run, to leave before the inevitable rejection settled in. But he stayed. He had to stay. Little did he know, this night would not end like he expected. In fact, it would shatter everything he believed about fairness, about people, and about the world around him. And it all started with the look that Kelly gave him as she turned away. The night began with awkward pleasantries, a clinking of glasses, and small talk that felt too forced to be real. Jamal tried to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine, but as he sat across from Kelly, he couldn't ignore the distance between them. She shifted in her seat, and when their eyes met, there was a flicker of something Jamal couldn't name, but it stung like a slap to the face. The friendly demeanor she'd shown before was gone, replaced with a subtle, uncomfortable coldness. Jamal tried to focus on the menu in front of him. He had to stay calm, to play along with this charade of a date, even if it didn't feel right. He could tell by the way she kept her distance, barely making eye contact, that something was wrong. But he had no idea just how deep it would go. The waitress, a young woman with a warm smile, came by to take their order. Kelly's response was quick, clear, and polite. But when it came to Jamal, the hesitation was unmistakable. The waitress, her smile tightening, glanced at Jamal, and then back at Kelly. "I'll have the steak, medium rare," Kelly said smoothly, never missing a beat. The waitress nodded, but then paused. "And for you, sir?" Jamal wasn't sure what made him feel more out of place, the fact that she'd addressed him last, or the slight awkwardness in her voice, as if he were an afterthought. He gave a half-smile, trying to break the tension. "I'll have the chicken." "Please," he said, trying to make himself sound casual. The waitress nodded again, but this time, the glance she gave him wasn't one of respect. It was more of a calculation, a quick assessment that felt like it went beyond his appearance and straight into his worth, as if his presence at the table was a challenge to something unspoken. As the waitress walked away, Jamal could feel the heat rising in his chest. He forced himself to take a deep breath, to stay calm. He could hear Maya's voice echoing in his mind, "You've got this, Dad. You can do it." He wanted to believe that. He needed to. Kelly, however, was silent, her eyes focused on the menu as if the words on the page held all the answers she was looking for. Jamal didn't know what to say. She wasn't the warm, welcoming woman he'd been hoping for. She was distant, almost cold, and her silence only deepened his growing discomfort. "Is everything okay?" he asked, trying to steer the conversation, make it feel less like an interrogation and more like a real connection. She hesitated for just a moment before looking up at him. "Yeah, everything's fine," she said, but the way she said it felt off. The words sounded like a script, rehearsed and hollow. "I'm sorry if I seem a little off," she added after a beat. "I'm just not used to meeting people like you, I guess." Jamal's heart sank. He had heard it before, that casual, offhand racism, the kind that masked its ugliness behind seemingly innocent words. But the way she said it stung. It was as if she was trying to make him feel less human, less worthy of being there. He could feel his chest tighten. "People like me?" Jamal repeated, his voice lower now, a thread of tension creeping in. He knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding, this was something deeper. The question hung in the air, thick with discomfort. Kelly shifted in her seat, clearly realizing her mistake but unwilling to backpedal. "I didn't mean it like that," she said, her voice a bit defensive now. "I just don't really meet many black people, you know. It's not something I'm used to." Jamal could feel the heat rising in his face, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Her words were like knives, each one cutting deeper, as if the entire night was nothing more than a reminder that, despite all his efforts, people like him would always be looked at differently. He didn't know how to respond at first. Was she admitting to her ignorance? Or was she justifying her prejudice? Either way, it didn't feel like an apology. It felt like an insult wrapped in a flimsy excuse. He looked away, trying to collect himself, trying to remember the lessons he'd taught himself over the years, to rise above, to ignore the hate, to not let it get under his skin. But it was hard, so damn hard. He had hoped, for just one night, that he wouldn't have to deal with this, that he could be seen as a person first. That he could have a simple, enjoyable evening without being reduced to the color of his skin. But that hope was slipping away faster than he could hold on to it. Just as he was about to say something, to call her out for what she'd said, the tension was broken by a loud, jarring noise. It was Kelly's phone. She glanced at it quickly, a small frown appearing on her face as she read the message. Jamal could see the change in her demeanor. It wasn't just the phone, it was something else. He could feel it in the air, the way she stiffened, the way her eyes darted toward the door. I need to take this, she said abruptly, already standing up and reaching for her purse. Her voice had changed again, this time more distant, colder. Jamal sat there, confused and angry, as she walked away. His mind was racing. What just happened? Was this the moment everything changed? Was this just another form of rejection, or was it something more insidious? He sat alone at the table, the sound of his breathing. And the clinking of silverware in the distance filling the silence. His thoughts were spinning, faster and faster, until he couldn't hear anything else. And then it hit him, Kelly wasn't coming back. His stomach churned. He felt a rush of anger, of frustration. He had tried. He had opened himself up. He had allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be the night things turned around for him. But it wasn't. It wasn't the night he'd been hoping for. As he stood to leave, his eyes caught a glimpse of something he hadn't noticed before. It was a small group of people standing near the entrance, chatting and laughing. When they saw him, their conversation immediately stopped. One of the women whispered something to the others, and they all looked over at him. The judgment was in their eyes before he could even see what they were saying. Jamal's heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't welcome here, not tonight, not ever. And then, just as he turned to walk away, a voice called out to him. "Hey, is everything okay?" It was Kelly. She was standing at the door, looking at him with a mix of curiosity and guilt in her eyes. But her expression wasn't enough to undo the damage. "I'm fine," he said, forcing a smile. "I'll be going now." With that, he turned and walked out into the cold, his mind racing, the sting of her words still fresh in his ears. He didn't want to look back. He didn't want to know if she had any more apologies or excuses for him. But as he stepped into the night, the real battle was just beginning. Jamal walked through the cold, the city lights flickering like broken promises in the distance. His mind was a storm, each step feeling heavier than the last. The sting of Kelly's rejection still burned in his chest. It wasn't just her look of disgust. It was the realization that, despite all his effort, he would never be seen for who he was, just what he looked like. But it wasn't over. He wasn't going to let it be. His footsteps quickened, and his anger surged, rising up like a tide he could no longer hold back. No longer just angry at Kelly, at the waitress, at everyone who ever dismissed him because of his skin, he was angry at a world that seemed to accept this. He had to fight back, not just for himself, but for every person who had ever felt the weight of prejudice on their shoulders. As Jamal reached the cafe's exit, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Maya, a simple one, "Dad, are you okay?" The question hit him harder than he expected. He stopped in his tracks, staring at the screen, wondering how he could ever explain the pain he was feeling. How could he tell his little girl that the world wasn't always fair? That the color of his skin meant something he had no control over, and that it was something people would use against him? His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but before he could reply, a voice called out from behind him. It was Kelly, rushing toward him in a flurry of motion. Her face was red, guilt and frustration written all over her. She reached him, breathless, her expression a mix of anxiety and regret. "Jamal, wait," she said, her voice shaking. I owe you an apology." He turned slowly, his face hardening. His anger hadn't faded. "An apology?" He let out a bitter laugh, voice low and cold. "You think that fixes this?" Kelly's eyes dropped to the ground for a moment before she met his gaze. "No. I don't expect it to fix anything. I didn't realize how deep my own biases were until tonight. I've been conditioned to see people like you a certain way, and I've been too blind to realize that. Jamal's chest tightened. You're not the only one conditioned to think that way. You've got a world full of people who've been taught to judge based on something as stupid as skin color. Her words came out in a rush, stumbling over each other. I know. And I'm sorry for the way I treated you. It was wrong. I know I can't erase it. His footsteps quickened, and his anger surged, rising up like a tide he could no longer hold back. No longer just angry at Kelly, at the waitress, at everyone who ever dismissed him because of his skin, he was angry at a world that seemed to accept this. He had to fight back, not just for himself, but for every person who had ever felt the weight of prejudice on their shoulders. As Jamal reached the cafe's exit, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Maya, a simple one, "Dad, are you okay?" The question hit him harder than he expected. He stopped in his tracks, staring at the screen, wondering how he could ever explain the pain he was feeling. How could he tell his little girl that the world wasn't always fair? That the color of his skin meant something he had no control over, and that it was something people would use against him? His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but before he could reply, a voice called out from behind him. It was Kelly, rushing toward him in a flurry of motion. Her face was red, guilt and frustration written all over her. She reached him, breathless, her expression a mix of anxiety and regret. "Jamal, wait," she said, her voice shaking. I owe you an apology." He turned slowly, his face hardening. His anger hadn't faded. "An apology?" He let out a bitter laugh, voice low and cold. "You think that fixes this?" Kelly's eyes dropped to the ground for a moment before she met his gaze. "No. I don't expect it to fix anything. I didn't realize how deep my own biases were until tonight. I've been conditioned to see people like you a certain way, and I've been too blind to realize that." Jamal's chest tightened. You're not the only one conditioned to think that way. You've got a world full of people who've been taught to judge based on something as stupid as skin color. Her words came out in a rush, stumbling over each other. I know. And I'm sorry for the way I treated you. It was wrong. I know I can't erase it. But I want to change. I want to be better. I don't want to be part of the problem. Jamal clenched his fists. You don't get it. It's not just about you or me. It's not just about one night, one date. It's about everything. Every day, every moment, where we're forced to be someone we're not, just to make others comfortable. His voice broke, and for the first time in the night, his guard was down. I've spent my whole life fighting just to exist without being judged. Kelly was silent for a long moment. Jamal could see the weight of his words hitting her, sinking in. But there was no turning back now. The truth was out, raw and unfiltered. I never wanted to make you feel that way, she whispered. Jamal clenched his jaw. I know. But that doesn't change anything. He turned to leave, but something in Kelly's voice stopped him. Jamal, please, she said, stepping forward. Don't walk away from me. I'm trying to make it right. I want to learn, I want to understand. Let me make it up to you. He paused, his back still to her. You can't fix this with one apology, he said, his voice flat. You can't undo years of prejudice with a few words. And you can't expect me to forgive you just because you want to be better now. It doesn't work like that. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. It was as if time had slowed, the tension between them thickening with every passing second. Kelly's eyes were pleading, desperate. But Jamal had already made up his mind. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. This was bigger than any date, bigger than any single act of racism. This was about a change that needed to happen, not in just one heart, but in society as a whole. He turned to face her, his expression hard but his words clear. The only way you can make it right is by using your voice. By standing up to the people who think like you used to. By fighting the system, not apologizing to me. Kelly stood frozen, unable to speak. Jamal took a deep breath. His fists still clenched. His next words came with the weight of everything he had ever carried. Do something. Or this will all be for nothing. With that, he walked away. And as he left the cafe, he realized this wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning of something bigger. The journey wasn't just about the pain. It was about how you chose to fight it. And as Jamal stepped into the night, he knew that the world was watching, waiting for someone to lead the way. Jamal didn't know where he was going, only that he had to keep walking. He wasn't angry anymore, not in the same way he had been when he first left the cafe. But there was a fire inside him, a determination that hadn't been there before. For the first time in his life, he felt the weight of his own voice. He knew he couldn't carry the burden of the world on his shoulders, but he could carry his truth. He spent the next few weeks not just recovering from the pain of that night, but transforming it. Jamal began speaking out, sharing his experience wherever he could, with friends, on social media, and in community meetings. The more he talked, the more people reached out to him. Some were like Kelly, people who had never considered their own biases until they had heard someone else's story. Others were those who had faced similar struggles, and they needed to know they weren't alone. But it wasn't just about talking. It was about action. Jamal wasn't interested in just being heard. He wanted change. And he knew the best way to start was by getting involved in a local community, pushing for better representation, more support, and a collective effort to challenge racism head-on. Through his advocacy, Jamal found a sense of purpose that he'd never imagined possible. He started working with a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping marginalized communities, using his own story to inspire others. He realized that, in sharing his pain, he had unlocked something greater.